probably, hopefully, the last one where we are with the old format, no camera on. So apologies to those who have enjoyed it. Congratulations to those who have not. But we're moving back to that. A quick follow-up on the news that came out earlier during SimWorld today as broken by B-Ron. And I think that serves as the follow-up to the information shared on Sunday. So SimWorld, the bounce obviously is gone. I appreciate everyone that's followed along with that. We'll find ways to make sure that the coverage continues on SimWorld today, so there will be continued coverage. I think that also will allow us to be a little bit more widespread in our coverage of the SimWorld U season thus far. Recognize that some of the programs that many folks are familiar with might not have gotten a ton of coverage. For example, you see Louisville mentioned. They have Seton Hall mentioned in terms of, really who just they're playing against. We haven't really talked about Duke too much. A lot of that is just the medium and the opportunity. We're not going to go through, 80-plus teams to tell you how each and every one of them is doing. But I think with the new format with SimWorld today, we'll be able to touch on a couple more items there that we otherwise would not have been. At the same time, I'd counterpoint, say Louisville, if our coverage does not focus on a team so far, chances are it's because they haven't been relevant, or in the case of the Tyson Simpson drama with Virginia, they were dysfunctional. That's kind of how news goes. The mediocre teams to the very bad teams don't typically see a lot of coverage. That's why we don't like to talk about the Washington Wizards. We like to talk about the Denver Nuggets, or if you have a brand, you talk about the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Lakers, and not the Indiana Pacers or the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cavs have gotten some conversation, but just the magnitude of coverage certainly trends in other directions. So regardless, to say SimWorld today should have an opportunity. That's enough of a 2-minute ramble on what we've been doing, and instead we're moving ahead to today. Wanted to look at a handful of things that I thought the idea was born out of the conversation prior to talking with Coach Drayton, but it was something that I've been throwing around, finding some things that we might not be talking about enough. I think we could expand this in time to say, what are we talking about enough, and do the whole Goldilocks format. I think we'll probably in the long run try to find ways to do that. But over the last last week, there was 3 things that stood out to me that I don't think we're talking about enough. And I will not intend this as 2 of these 3 things are not going to necessarily be glowingly positive for the teams involved. That does not mean that that's what we're looking for is the negatives. We want to try to find the positive things that we're not talking about enough, so I'm going to save the positive for last. But the first thing that we haven't really been talking about enough, Harlan Zombie Stars have really been struggling. They're 1-5 in their last 6 games. On the season, they have the 6th-ranked defense, allowing 67 points per game. Opponents are shooting 46.7% from the floor and 31.9% from deep. And all of those numbers, obviously, are going to be slightly influenced up by the struggles that they've had over the last 6 games, again, in which they've gone 1-5. In that stretch, they've allowed 67 or more points in all 6 games and 72 or more in 5 of the 6 games. They've allowed teams to shoot above 37% from deep in 4 of their 6 games. And again, this is a team that previously allowed teams to only shoot 31.9%. And opponents are shooting above 46% in 5 of their last 6. Again, that's their season average. This is a team that's always relied on defense this season. Yes, Benari James is a great scorer. They have some good pieces on this offense, but it's a team that their basis was off of their defense. On the season, they were averaging as a team 68 points per game and allowing 67. That defense is no longer holding its water, and that's why we're seeing this team start to struggle, and we just haven't talked about it. Number 2, staying in the slumps. Again, this is not intended to only be on the slumps. It's just the 3 things that stood out to me that, again, not seeing a ton of coverage. Bad Boys basketball. They've lost 6 straight games. There's only 5 teams in the league right now that have 6-plus game losing streaks. Bad Boys with 6, the North with 6, Beyond the Arch with 7. I think that could be a candidate, would have been had we done this a couple weeks ago. 7 straight losses. Middle East at 7, and then Latin America 8. I think the last 2 are probably the only 2 surprises, but those are the only teams with 6-plus game losing streaks. Congratulations to Skinny Washington and Queen City Kings for avoiding that. They came in with, the 4s, and Showtime even had a 5-gamer. Their offense has been hit or miss. That is the crux of this group is the inconsistencies. In 3 games over the last 6, they have scored less than 60 points. and they have 2 games of 79 and 80, and then another of 70. This is a team that averaged 68 per game. So they've been really atrocious in a handful of games on offense, and then when their offense does show up, their defense can't manage to get stops. Bo Pagnotti has really struggled with his shot over this stretch. 3 straight games, the last 3 of them, he's shot sub 40%. 5 of the last 6 games, he's been under 43%, and he's not shot above 47% since all the way back on January 18th. It has not been a good run of things for Samuel Pagnotti, who's shooting 41% on the season and 29.9% from deep. Meanwhile, flipping now to our positives, Samuel Baucus has been phenomenal. I think this could even be a candidate for underrated. He's ranked 21 in the country right now. I think that's probably a worthwhile ranking, but he doesn't feel you've got the respect of it. And look, myself included, at the beginning of the season, I've said it, I wasn't a huge Baucus fan. That has completely changed. I don't know if we're highlighting that as much as it should be. We've highlighted it. I think it needs to be more so. He's obviously having a great season, 17.7 points per game. He's shooting 43% from beyond the arc in the last 6 games. 3 straight, he's shot 60%, 57%, and 55%. On the losing streak, he's been 48% or above in 4 of the 6 and above 40% in 5 of 6. Now, above 40% isn't the greatest, but that tells you that other one was like 42%. I wouldn't call this the best stretch of his season, only because he's been having a great year as a highly efficient scorer and an elite playmaker for others. 4.4 assists per game is nothing to laugh at. He has been very dynamic with that. That puts him in the top 10 just behind Suno Chapa and Red Jointer. And again, that's 17.7, just outside of the top 10, where Arthur Lattimore is at 19.9 at 10. But high volume for a team that really needs him to step up. And then our other thing that's been positive, and this was, I saw tweeted out by Samuel Charles, felt like it might be worth diving into. South America, 3 straight wins. That's currently tied for the 2nd straight, unless we'll get IT on this live reporting. Now it is the 3rd longest winning streak after the Originators moved up to 4 straight wins, and BCDs obviously are sitting there at 7. But that's not even the crux of it. That's a great little tagline, but there's more. They've won 6 of their last 7 games. This is almost the polar opposite of their season a year ago, where they started 5-0 and then fell apart. Over their last 7 games, their defense is allowing 62.1 points per game, which would rank number 3 in the entire league, behind only the Originators' 60.8 and Philadelphia's 61.9 points per game. This hasn't been a schedule full of easy wins. There has been a couple. Obviously, they played Middle East. They played Latin America. Neither of those teams, we just talked about them with long losing streaks, neither of those teams are all that great. But in the meantime, they've beaten Cascadia, they've beaten Lakeshore Drive, they beat a competent Run DMV squad. And in their one loss, it was 80-65. You look at that number, Philadelphia in the midst of their 12-game winning streak, you look at that and you say, wow, Philadelphia blew the doors off them. Not at all. They trailed by 3 points entering the 4th quarter of that game. Tyler Montalvin has been absolutely fantastic on offense. He scored 10+ in 6 of their last 8 games with 3 double-doubles and only 1 game with less than 7 rebounds during that span. Meanwhile, Rafael Lima has been really good too. Since he entered the starting lineup back on January 4th, he's had 6 games in double figures. There's 11 outings since that January 4th. 5 of those games have come since February 2nd. That's the date in which South America is 6-1. They're really coming around, and they're peaking at the absolute right time. Again, everybody's making the race to 1. That's the positive, right? You want to get hot at the right time. That's exactly what South America is doing. But importantly, you need seeding, and they are now a game and a half out of Atlantis, who's the division leader in the Intercontinental region, and they're just 1 game behind both Oceania and Europe. So they're streaking, they're rising up the rankings, and they're trying to position themselves now at 500, where we've talked about this one ad nauseum. The SimWorld Prep middle class, it's massive. They were on the bottom end of that. They have quickly transitioned to being middle to top of that, which means you win a couple more games, you maintain this 3 wins, 1 loss, 3 wins, 1 loss pace, right? 75% wins, or even bump that down to 60% wins, which is still a really high mark. You're going to start jumping a lot of these teams and positioning yourself with much better standing getting into it. Because as great as these top teams are, what you really want to do is position yourself to play the worst possible team you can, obviously. Unlikely that they're going to be in a position to play Latin America, Middle East, Gotham 5. Those are your 3 lowest records at this point in the season. But there's a chance that you could at least get one of the teams that's on the bottom end. Maybe you run into a Rocky Mountain Monsters whose defense has really struggled this season. Now, if you're South America, your defense has been phenomenal. Your offense gets rolling. Your defense tries to slow them down. That's what it's time to start keeping an eye on as we're past the midway point. We're nearing the 20-game mark for most every team at this point. I don't think anybody has surpassed it. Cascadia is at 20 games. There's quite a few at 19. SimWorld Europe is at 20 games. As we start lurching into this 25th, 26th game, the seeding is going to start mattering. And where you are going to end up matched up with a team is going to be as important as anything. Because if Rocky Mountain, let's just use them as an example, their offense has been phenomenal this season, their defense has not. If they play against a team in that opening round or they're set up on the side of a bracket that has a couple of struggling defensive teams, you start to really like their chances of advancing. All right, well, we are going to be talking to you a heck of a lot more on SimWorld today, so thank you for tuning in there. Thank you for tuning in here, and we'll catch you either, I guess it'll be tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, on the new format, SimWorld Today. All right, talk to you.